Good afternoon all, and welcome to our webinar on the M&E perspective on the Building Safety Act. First, just like to say thank you to everybody who's attending today, giving up your lunch, giving half hour of your lunch up. It's appreciated, and hopefully you find some value out of what we discussed today. So, as we all know, the Building Safety Act is a large subject with lots of key stakeholders, from clients to consultants, designers, contractors, the construction industry as a whole. And the purpose of today is to run through the legislation and provide an M&E engineering perspective on some of the requirements of the legislation, and navigating some of the new requirements across construction projects. So, introduction of myself. So my name is Jack Kenny, Associate Director in the M&E Engineering Group. Slight agenda for the webinar. So an introduction to the Building Safety Act 2022, just providing some of the background, having a sort of run through some of the new duty holders and requirements of the Act, discussion on current challenges within the industry and some of the responses to that from consultants, designers, clients, and also a look at the government response as the Act is now implemented, and obviously the conversation is ongoing. We will then look at Brookbanks' response to the legislation, what we're doing internally with the teams across the business to ensure we're up to speed and can advise clients in the correct manner. Finally, then we'll have a look at a quick case study that we've got, and we'll run through that. And then as we get to the end, then if we've hopefully got time, we'll go through a question and answer session. So attendees, if you want to drop questions into the team chat, please do so, and I'll have a look at them in the end and run through. So then an overview of the Act. I mean, it's been in place now for a couple of years, so I would like to think a lot of people on the call are cognizant of the requirements, but nevertheless, the Building Safety Act 2022 is now law in England to improve building safety, and there's key consideration to defining what a high-risk building and what a non-high-risk building is, as they have different requirements and different responsibilities are provided for each, and ensuring that all the requirements of these are sort of picked up for the project. New duties are introduced for those responsible in the design, construction and management of buildings, so it's very much holistic, start to finish, and very much has implications once construction is finished and occupancy is begun, and the management of buildings once they're in use. The Act establishes a new regulator, so the Building Safety Regulator, to enforce the rules, to review and approve gateway submissions, and ultimately administer and sort of ensure that the golden thread of information that's required for high-risk buildings is followed and is in place throughout the design, construction and operation of the buildings. So some of the key aspects then, as we sort of just discussed, classification of HRBs, which are now subject to more stringent regulatory controls, introduction of new duty holders and clear accountability for building safety throughout all members of the design, construction and operation teams. Mandatory competence requirements for all professionals, so ensuring that the correct construction professionals are on the project who have the relevant experience, qualifications and competencies to undertake the design, construction and management of buildings of this nature. Slight change in building control responsibilities in terms of regulatory bodies resisting giving prescriptive guidance on compliance and putting that responsibility on to designers and design team members, clients, contractors, etc., to prove compliance and ensure that building regs are adhered to throughout. And finally, an updated application and notification procedures impacting project approval, start dates, and ongoing compliance oversight for schemes. So on to new duty holders then. So some of the sort of key ones listed here is the client is now very much a responsibility of the client within the new legislation. There's also a new duty holder as the principal designer, which is slightly different to CDM regs. This is a building regs principal designer. We then have a principal contractor, again similarly specific to building regulations. Then designers and contractors also have new duties now as part of the legislation. So I think the ones to probably sort of focus on and some of the key bits to sort of dig out here would be, and I'll start with the principal designer. Generally, their role now is managing design compliance and overseeing and coordinating the design team to ensure that all parts of building regulations are complied with during design stage and are thought of during the design processes. Part of their role will be to track risks, identify gaps, and manage the design development across REBA stages 1 to 4. So the key design stages as a sort of holistic overview of a design and construction project. They will have responsibilities with the management of Gateway 1 and 2 approvals. So they will need to oversee and ultimately submit applications to the building safety regulator. However, there is a large part of the application that is developed by the design team and then by the construction team during those specific phases of the project. And also have a very keen eye on the management of the golden thread information during the design stage. I think secondly then the principal contractor, which is another very key part of the legislation and the requirements. And their role very much starts once that Gateway 2 approval has been given and we're into sort of REBA stage 5 and construction has started. So part of their role is to oversee and coordinate construction phases to ensure compliance with all parts of building regulations. So a sort of way to think of this is a slight handover from the BRPD from design to construction. They will then sort of manage that process and manage the compliance during construction. They'll also have a role to plan, manage and monitor the construction works with all contractors. So the main contractors, subcontractors, sort of key parts of the construction team, but also manage that alongside the duty holders from the design stage. So the BRPD, consultants, architects, the client, etc. They will work closely with the BRPD. It's very much a role that needs a lot of knowledge sharing, needs a lot of information passed from one to another, and we sort of found that that's rather key in HRBs now is that close collaboration between the BRPD and the BRPC. And then finally, they'll take on the management then of the golden thread information and the completion of that, and ultimately the final submission into Gateway 3 once the project's got to that point during the life cycle. Some of the other sort of duty holders then, so we've touched on the client. The client now has a specific role. They need to be able to, and they need to verify that duty holders are competent in their skills and abilities. And this is done with the support of their building regulating principal designer. So the client can't shy away from that anymore. Ultimately, the decision of who they appoint is on them, and they have to satisfy themselves that their design team and the members are competent and able to take on buildings of that nature. Designers themselves are also accountable for that. They need to be able to prove that they have the required competencies, that they've worked on projects similarly before, doing this via detailed case studies and CVs and having a good record of past projects and history of designing and building these sort of schemes. And then similarly, contractors, so main and subcontractors, they also need to be able to prove their competency and that they've carried works of this nature out before, in line with regulations, in line with the requirements of HRBs, and they also need to be able to prove the proficiency of their on-site workforce. So again, you know, the operatives they're putting onto projects, the people turning up to do the work and to do the build phase, you know, very similarly to the design team, need to be able to prove that they've done it before, that they're able and competent. So onto sort of what we're starting to see is sort of current challenges on projects, and we'll sort of start to focus on HRBs here again. I think we all probably know the real challenges we're all facing is the gateway process. So a bit of background on that: we now have a 3-stage gateway submission process where the building safety regulator needs to be satisfied that certain aspects are being picked up, and the design, planning and construction of HRBs is cognizant of the building regulations from start to finish, and that key elements of the design are done and complete prior to spades going into the ground. And then finally, sort of key elements of the golden thread are in place before occupancy can begin. So I think for the base of this, we'll sort of keep the conversation on Gateway 2, but in the first instance, we'll run through the gateway. So Gateway 1, which is the first critical checkpoint, and the aim of this is to ensure that the fire safety and the fire engineering has been considered early into the project, and that the fire safety information is submitted with the planning gap. So generally that would be fire principles, any indication of emergency vehicle access, and integration of the fire safety requirements into the design of the building. Once this is approved and the project moves on, the next gateway to navigate would be Gateway 2. So second critical checkpoint, but also is a hard stop at this juncture. So the construction stages cannot commence until Gateway 2 approval is granted. And then finally, at the end of the project, we will then be at Gateway 3. And again, this is also a hard stop, which stops occupancy of buildings. So the idea is the occupancy cannot commence until Gateway 3 approval is granted. So onto Gateway 2, sort of here I'll give some of the general items, and then I think this is where we'll start to get into the M&E perspective on the Act. So one of the real key items for Gateway 2 is the sort of shift in the level of detail required for projects. So it very much is providing a fully detailed design at REBA stage 4 level to be submitted to the regulator for Gateway 2, with all services having to be sort of included in that, not just M&E, obviously outside of that, including architectural structures, etc., and fire. Gateway 2 will require full set of detailed plans, specifications, calculation schedules, and very much needs evidence of how the project is demonstrating compliance with the building regulations. And I think a key aspect there is almost leaving no stone unturned, in the sense of, you know, don't hold anything back for the Gateway 2 submission. If your information is there and it's ready and it's complete, include it, you know, put it in there, signpost for it, which is another key aspect of it. You know, make it very clear and concise where the information is, what you've done and how you've complied. Part of the Gateway 2 submission will also be a strategy for change control and management, and how that will be handled throughout the project if changes are made, especially after the approval is granted. We found on projects that seem to work well at the moment that a building regulation tracker is utilised from sort of early REBA stages, and then is followed through from 2, 3 and 4, tracking compliance, giving a clear record of design development from start to finish, and how you've essentially found your route to compliance. And finally, I think on Gateway 2, it's probably good to know what the actual approval times are. So you're looking at the statutory times are 8 weeks for existing HRBs and 12 weeks for new HRBs. But I'm sure a lot of us on this call have experienced much more significant timescales. And from our experience, most projects are really looking at around 24 weeks to 36 weeks to gain approval. And that's sort of really sort of putting forward a major challenge for schemes and the viability of projects, especially ones that sort of fit that criteria of HRB, being 18 metres plus in tall or 7 stories high. So onto a sort of M&E perspective then of Gateway 2. As I sort of said, don't leave anything out, submit it. From a consultant perspective, look at it as if you were the other side of the fence and you were reviewing somebody else's scheme. What would you ask for? You're going to ask for all the calculations. You're going to ask for all the schedules. You're going to ask for detailed specs. You know, it's not just a case of putting the drawings in, you know, and part of the information. Put everything into that app and don't leave everything out. A sufficient level of detail is imperative. Signposting is a big one. Make it very clear where the information is. Don't allow the regulator to sort of have a hard time to find the information and where you demonstrate the compliance. Another key part of this is contributing into the design stages for some of the key areas of HRB, so basements, risers, stair cores, lift lobbies, and also with some of the key services from our engineering, so sprinklers, smoke ventilation, life safety systems, you know, such as the fire alarm, motor lighting, etc. Ensuring that the key items of the golden thread have been input into the regulator is going to want to see that the golden thread is being thought of and maintained right from the start. It isn't just a thing that's handed over now and it's done near the end. It's very much a holistic from start to finish requirement. Another key we found that's really helped us is using high-level coordination software. So going full BIM, using Revit on projects, which enables that sort of key coordination between design team members, the architect, structural engineer, fire engineers. And also Revit models can be a very good way of sort of administering that golden thread and issuing models and keeping a digital record is really helpful. And I think I'll finish on that as I started. If you were as a consultant reviewing a stage 4 information, think of what you'd want and what you'd request, and ultimately what you want to make sure is that the regulator isn't looking at your package thinking, oh, they've missed this or they've not provided this point of information. So on to industry response. We've sort of, you know, the industry is struggling with the gateways, struggling with the timelines. I think, you know, we're at a point now where new duty holders are starting to understand their requirements. The sort of knowledge sharing that's been going on the past 18 months has been really good. And the industry is starting to understand what's their new requirements. I think a key one I'll touch on here is the legal and financial exposure now that the Act brings in. So there's increased liability and claims exposure now for projects for HRBs where the retrospective claim period before 2022 is 30 years and the prospective period afterwards now is 15 years. But that's increasing the risk for all professionals. It's not just essentially a claim against developers or architects anymore. It will be everybody part of that design team, part of that construction team. So sort of some of our thoughts here, especially from an M&E perspective, would be to keep a keen eye on your appointment contracts and the liability given to clients, ensuring that your PI is suitable for projects of this nature and that you're being very robust with what you're signing up to and agreeing to provide. Due to the length of time that claims can be made, it really is important now to keep suitable records for that length of time. So, you know, at minimum 15 years, including the layouts, calculation schedules and specifications you submitted, all the design development that's gone on through the process. And I think finally on the legal and financial exposure, it's probably a case of ensuring that experienced professionals are undertaking the quality monitoring during the construction phase. So poor examples of installation are highlighted, poor examples of quality are recorded, and maintaining this record of inspections and snagging, etc. Not only helps with the final gateway, but it also gives you a leg to stand on if anything sort of is coming after you once PC and occupancy has been granted. So some of the government response then. So as we say, the Act's in place now. Projects are going through the gateways, and sort of one of the key bottlenecks is the building safety regulator, and the sort of level of resource they have to review and approve projects. So I think that's one of the key for the government at the moment, is getting the building safety regulator in a position where they can hit them statutory timescales of 8 and 12 weeks, respectively, for existing and new, and ultimately then supporting their own target to deliver 1.5 million homes over the next Parliament. There is also an upcoming launch of the Building Safety Levy, which is going to be very soon. It's planned for the autumn 2025, where new residential buildings requiring building control approval will need to contribute to that levy for future remediation work, with a sort of target of 3.4 billion over 10 years. And then sort of this will tie into their upskilling of the building safety regulator, ensuring that training programs, certification frameworks are in place to improve the competency of professionals. And there's focused training being delivered and initiatives to attract people into the building safety regulator. So onto our stance then as a business. So Brookbanks, this is sort of M&E, of course, but it's actually us as a whole. So, first and foremost, we're going to embrace the new legislation, as we all need to, and support team members from top to bottom with developing the knowledge and skills for projects of this nature. We'll ensure our own sort of compliance as designers to be able to prove competency for projects. So having a sort of a vast library of case studies and CVs for all for HRBs and also non-HRBs, because part of the requirement for a non-HRB is still to be able to prove that you're able and you're capable to undertake schemes of them natures. We're sort of, and this is part of that process, increasing the awareness with clients and colleagues and other industry professionals that are developing and designing high-risk buildings. We feel we have a holistic understanding of the design and detail and the level of information that's required to navigate the gateway processes, especially Gateway 2. Our awareness of the requirements of the Act, such as the golden thread for both ourselves as a consultant and also contractors once we're getting near Gateway 3, should also provide a lot of value schemes of this nature. Part of our job in M&E and what we do, and something we do very well, is having a real holistic understanding of the building regs and some of the key parts of it relevant to us, so Part L, Part O, Part M, Part F, but also some of the other key ones such as Part B, etc. We're also starting to implement new services to support key clients and large schemes. So that technical advisory and quality monitoring that we discussed we're starting to see that now as a breakout service for clients who want that technical assurity through the construction phases, trying to reduce their risk and ensure that the construction phase has a high quality aspect to it, which then helps them get through Gateway 3. And then ultimately, if we do all that well, which we do, we can help clients reduce risk and suppress future limitation claims relevant to the M&E install and building services on these projects. So we've got about 6 minutes left. I'll rip through these sort of key people in the business for the Act. So in the M&E team, we've got our group director, Paul, 2 of our technical directors, Lucy and Grant, and then myself. And then in our structural engineering team, Chris Vivian, our group director, is also very aware and cognizant of the Act and the requirements. A quick case study. So one a few to pick from, but I thought to pick the one that's actually live at the minute that we're working on. So a new development down at Brent Cross Town, which is a very large sort of master development. We are developing one of the high rises on plot 22, and we have been involved from REBA stages 1 and 2 for the master developer, and then picked up the scheme for the sort of developer of the building from REBA stages 3 and 4, and then we'll continue on that with quality monitoring and site monitoring roles up to the end of the REBA stages. We sort of at the moment are working hard through stage 3, going through a lot of the coordination and the requirements of stage 3 to put us in a very good position as a design team into stage 4. And I think one of the key things that's happening on this project that is going to stand us on good stead is the building regulation tracker, where we are having a constant review of compliance, design development, what's required, what we're providing, where that information is. Again, to touch on the subject of the actual submission, signposting is key, ensuring that the regulator can find information easy, and that the sort of the compliance is very clear, very easy to determine. And then finally Q&A. So I'll just have a look on question panel, see what we've got. So a question here then. So do Brookbanks have the expertise to provide enough detailed design and specialist fire safety elements such as fire detection, AOVs, MOVs, dry rise, etc., to avoid specialist subcontractor engagement for Gateway 2 applications on an existing HRB, and are Brookbanks taking on the BRPD role for M&E only projects? So I'll probably answer the second part of that first. No, we won't be taking the BRPD role on for M&E only projects at this time. However, from the first part of the questions in terms of fire detection, AOVs, MOVs, dry risers, we definitely have the skills in-house for the life safety systems. I think my advice on a project of that nature to the client would be that some form of fire engineering will be required, and that's not something we do in Brookbanks. It's usually done by another consultant, but very much able to add value as part of that team on projects of that nature. So that answers that question. I have another one about competency blockers. So the question says for consultants, designers, etc., who currently don't have the competencies for existing or new HRBs, sort of how do they navigate that to be able to do so? It's a very good question. It's a very hard one to answer. From conversations I've had with a lot of intelligent design professionals in the last 12-18 months, the sort of answer at the moment is you're going to find it very difficult to break into schemes that are HRBs, because a key driver of legislation is that competency aspect, is that proof of sort of past history designing, managing projects that are now defined as HRBs. So it's a tough one, and the problem you're finding then is it creates a slight monopoly on who can and who can't, and I think that unfortunately it's going to be an issue that probably carries on for a little while until the industry becomes comfortable with a route for companies, designers, consultants, etc., who haven't done projects of this nature. How do they get a foot in the door? So unfortunately, that one, it's the sort of current standpoint is that if you don't have the competency, unfortunately, you probably shouldn't be looking at working on existing or new high risk buildings. I think that's it for the questions, unless there's one more. Yeah, one more just now. So In your experience, has it been better to go two-stage rather than single stage, or maybe advance the design to stage 4 prior to tender? Again, very good question. We are finding now that a two-stage tender is the way that risk is being shared, and also because of the early engagement with the contractor actually forming part of the gateway to submission, that PCSA agreements are becoming very common. Contractors coming on board sort of during the REBA 2 to 4 process and being very much involved in that gateway to submission. So I think, to wrap that up, in our experience at the moment, yes, two-stage tenders seem to be the way to go. But ultimately, in that, you will be advancing the design to stage 4 much quicker than you will do in other projects. So another question then. So can the PD role / liabilities be passed down between consultants, i.e. between stage of design? Traditionally, main contractor will take the design from stage 3 onwards with a new MEP consultant. So I don't believe so. All members of the design team and all members of the construction team have their own responsibilities now as part of the Act. I don't believe that the definition of the BRPD can be shared. Obviously, their role is the coordination of the design and coordination of the requirements to get through building regulations and the gateways. But ultimately, if you have signed up to undertake the BRPD role, then that ultimately rests on your shoulders. And to answer the second part of that question, traditionally main contractors take design stage 3 onwards. So yeah, what we're also starting to see is, and the conversations are, that it's actually pushing projects back down a more traditional procurement route rather than that sort of D&B. And very interestingly, for M&E engineers, which doesn't usually happen a lot, we're starting to be innovated over to contractors as well as structural engineers and architects to keep that continuity between the design stages, and as well for the contractor, it's demonstrating the compliance is much easier when you've used the same design team rather than picking new consultants once the PCSA agreement's agreed. So we'll do one more question because it's 2 minutes past 1 and I don't want to keep you all for too long. Question is, do Brookbanks have any experience in navigating the the Building Safety Act / Golden Thread in relation to existing buildings and upgrading existing plant rooms to connect onto district heating networks? Yes, the answer to that would be yes, and I think because of some of the expertise we also have around the business, we have a very strong utilities team that sits in the wider Brookbanks group. I think between us, that is definitely a project that we can help on and support and give some advice. So I think we'll go one last question and then we will call it a day. So question is, do HRBs now lend themselves to a specific contract, i.e. For example, JCT or NEC, given the changes? So yes, as I said, we are finding now that sort of traditional procurement is sort of having a rebirth with the requirements of the Building Safety Act. So that's definitely coming away from JCT sort of D&B contracts for a couple of reasons. One, the contractor doesn't want to take that much risk anymore in terms of a design and build, and then secondly, because of the nature of two-stage tenders and PCSAs, then the contractor has to be engaged much earlier, which is sort of determining the route that projects are procured. So with that, guys, again, as I said at the start, really appreciate your time, really appreciate you giving up half an hour of your lunch. We'll share the slides after, I believe, and if there's any other queries, any other questions, please reach out. You can get me on LinkedIn or through our sort of Brookbanks info@Brookbanks email address. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for your time, and hopefully see you all soon. Cheers.